Debate on homeschooling in Michigan after the tragedy of Stony Blair and Stephen Barry. Lawmakers say they want to reform the homeschooling system.
If you may recall, Blair's mother had claimed that those children were being homeschooled. All the while, they were dead in her freezer. Last week, Representatives Stephanie Chang from Detroit introduced a bill that would provide reform to part of the homeschooling system. It would require parents or guardians to provide the names and the address of every child who is being homeschooled. There would also be 2 visits to the home every year from a doctor, a teacher, or a social worker. But of course, not everyone likes these reforms. Some parents say they aren't supporting them because it assumes that something is wrong with people who homeschool.
Another person not in favor is State Senator Phil Pavlov. He's pretty important in this argument because he chairs the Senate Education Committee and says that bill will never make it out of his committee. Now, this week in a public letter, he wrote, quote, "Let's be clear, this legislation would not have stopped Ms. Blair from killing her children. Blair was willing to break every law in the book and routinely and effectively lied for years to hide her crimes. Instead, the new bill is a transparent attempt by some in Lansing to bully, threaten, and intimidate parents who choose not to send their children to traditional public schools." He
goes on to say parents deserve to make the choice about what type of school their child should attend, and homeschooled kids are some of the most successful in the state, he says.
And joining us right now, Senator Coleman Young II, who is backing that bill, and Tony Daunt from the Michigan Freedom Fund, who has backed Senator Pavlov. Senator, first of all, with you, what do you make of Senator Pavlov saying this is just an attempt, this is a government overreach and a bullying of parents?
Well, first of all, Stevie and Joanne, let me say it's such a pleasure to finally be here on ABC7. I have arrived. I just want to say thank you so much. I'm finally somebody. You're the best that ever do it. So
I want to get to the question now.
Exactly.
I appreciate it. I just had to say that first. But to the question, listen, we could all agree with Senator Pavlov, but then we could all be wrong. I think the fact of the matter is that this is about making sure that we protect children. Michigan is only 1 out of 11 states that don't have reporting requirements. And I think the fact that we had a child who was beaten with a 2x4, who was burned in the back with an iron, and then who was cut up and put in a freezer like a piece of meat. I think we have to have reporting requirements necessary to make sure that this doesn't happen again, because I think that politics should stop at the edge of tortured and murdered children, and that's what happened here. So I'm not bashing homeschoolers, and I'm not bashing people who homeschool their children. I think that people who homeschool their children are wonderful, incredible, exceptional Americans and Michiganders. But there are a fringe within a fringe that abuse the system, and that's what these bills would do. It would stop abuse and protect our kids.
Tony, I want to ask you this. He mentioned there, the senator, that Michigan's only 1 of 11 states that does not require some sort of like a registration or something with homeschooling. Why are you against that? Are we almost behind the times because we don't have that?
No, absolutely not. The simple fact of the matter on this is that homeschooling had absolutely nothing to do with this tragic situation. I'm a father myself, and the idea of harming a child, especially your own, it is absolutely disgusting. And this type of government intrusion into the lives of individuals who have chosen to send their children to an alternative school, to homeschool them, to make the choice they see best for their child, this intrusion would not have stopped this monster from murdering her children and lying to law enforcement and others about it.
Yeah, Tony, while we have you on the line, I want to read you an excerpt from that letter where Senator Pavlov says, we'll quote him here, "As the chairman of the Senate Education Committee, I want to write today to assure you that this is anti-parent legislation. It will not see the light of day in my committee." Now, is this obstructions to not even give the bill a fair hearing?
No, I think we applaud Senator Pavlov for his strong stance on this, and we appreciate him speaking out so forcefully, because the bottom line is this is in fact a shameful attempt by some in Lansing to use a tragedy, a very horrible tragedy, for partisan gain, and to use it as a cudgel to put something in place that they couldn't get through because it's such an intrusion into the lives of people who are following the law, who don't deserve to be intimidated for their choices, and in fact should be supported for taking the time to educate their children and do what they see as best for them.
I hear you talking in there, Coleman. You have something to say about that?
Yeah, I just think that's totally false. I mean, what he's saying. I mean, listen, no one is using this as a political tragedy. Listen, the fact of the matter is, in this state, you don't have to report to the school district if you take your kids out of the system. And in this state, we have a constitutional responsibility to provide education to all of our kids. And this is about protecting kids. I mean, he's saying these things that are just fundamentally false. I mean, if you believe that, then you might as well believe that hobbits exist and that you can ride a pink pony with a flaming chariot in the back of it, because you have a better chance of doing that than you do of what he said being true. I think no one's not using this for political gain. If anything, we're speaking truth to power, and we're putting in regulations that are around, that are in other states, to make sure that we protect our children.
Tony,
That's
let me ask you, let me interrupt you for 1 second there. I just want to ask Tony this. You know, I think our liberties are infringed upon to a certain degree every day, really. We have a law that we have to wear seatbelts, right?
Well, any law is an infringement on liberty.
If I buy Sudafed, I can't buy it over the counter anymore. I have to sign something and give my license to the pharmacist. I'm not misusing Sudafed, but others are. So my rights are being infringed a little bit, but it's for the good of other people who abuse the system. Isn't this kind of the same here? You ask people who are doing the right thing to a little infringement of their liberties, maybe to protect others.
No, I don't want to give in to the premise that we should give up any of our liberties, number one, but more importantly, there are already steps and things in place, processes in place through state law to look after children and to make sure that they are not being abused, that they're not being so terribly beaten and murdered and stuffed into freezers.
Well, Tony, that obviously didn't work this time.
I'm sorry, what was that?
That obviously didn't work this time. You say there are things in place. In this case, it failed miserably.
And the issue then is if the current systems are failing, then we should look at fixing them. We shouldn't look at adding another layer of bureaucratic overreach and basically making people prove that they're not murdering their children because they homeschool them.
Yeah, Senator, what do you say to that?
That's not what this is. I mean, again, I love him. I'm sure he's a great man and a great human being, but he's just wrong on this issue. I mean, the fact of the matter is, this is about giving the tools necessary to executives and lawmakers to make sure that we penalize those who torture children and that we protect those who don't. I mean, the fact of the matter is, the majority of people who are homeschoolers are very good parents.
Yes.
Yeah. They are a standard of excellence that we all should look up to. But that is what they are, excellent. And not everybody in this system is that. And there are people who take advantage of that. And let's remember what this is about. This is not about politics. This is about children who were beaten, who were tortured, who were chopped up, and who were put in the freezer like meat. It was one of the most inhumane things I've ever seen. There has got to be a response for that, and that's what this bill does. It protects people, it protects our children, and makes sure this does not happen again. Right. And if it does, they does not go unaccounted for.
One thing you're wrong about, it is about politics. Thank you very much, Senator.
Yeah, Tony, Senator and Tony, we thank both of you for taking the time to join us today.